takes us under your passenger seat.
Hello, darling. Remember me? That earring you lost? I thought we were close, but then it took 15 minutes to notice I was missing in this ghastly carpeting. That's 15 minutes you could have used to switch your car insurance to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars. Money you could use for new earrings. And wouldn't that be nice? For you.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
Times sure have changed since Geico started saving people money over 75 years ago. We didn't have video games like today, but that's not to say we didn't have fun. One of my favorite games was Don't Get Kicked by the Goat. Now that's some real excitement, especially when someone lost. Yep, back then we knew two things: how to have a good time, and that Geico was always a good deal.
Geico. Saving people money on car insurance for over 75 years.
Fridays just got fabulous. Don't forget to reserve a seat in the Happy Hour Lounge with Ben and Alexander every Friday at 6 p.m. on Kcaa 1050 AM. Art Bell is back, and he's coming to Kcaa.
There are a lot of people who think that we are Martians, that there's a strong possibility that we are Martians. That's why I said us. No, I'm serious. There was a civilization on Mars. That life had been us or our ancestors.
Nobody is more captivating than Art Bell.
Now, I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, there is something here that defies logical explanation.
Tune into the best, Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell.
The only way you're going to get the American people to pony up the billions of dollars, however many hundreds of billions it would be to go to Mars, the only way you're going to get them to do that is to convince them that we have a real reason to go.
Want to take a ride?
Coming July 20th. Weeknights at midnight on Kcaa 1050 AM.
From the KCAA Weather Center, I'm Tom Ladd for this afternoon. It'll be sunny. Expect a high near 93. A light and variable wind out of the west at 5 to 10 expected. Clear tonight with low around 66. Expect a west wind at 10 to 15. Becoming south at 5 to 10 after midnight. Winds could gust as high as 25 miles per hour. Sunny Wednesday. Expect a high near 94. And for Wednesday night, clear with a low around 65. That's your weather forecast for this hour from the station that leaves no listener behind. NBC News Radio, AM 1050, KCAA.
Hi, welcome to AT&T.
Hi, can you tell us more about rollover data?
Yeah, what do we have to do?
Not a thing. If you're a Mobile Share Value customer, your unused plan data automatically rolls over for 1 month. It's our way of saying thanks.
That's so wonderful.
You know, let's hug.
Oh, that's okay. We don't have to.
I think we do.
Yeah, I think we do.
Nice.
Let's bring it in. Oh.
Oh, wow. And we're hugging. All three of us. Really hugging. Ooh, who smells like bacon?
Introducing AT&T Rollover Data. All Mobile Share Value plans now come with rollover data on the network with the nation's strongest LTE signal. AT&T, mobilizing your world. AT&T reminds you to never text and drive. It can wait.
Available only with AT&T Mobile Share Value plans. Rollover data automatically expires after 1 month or with any plan change. Other restrictions apply. Visit att.com/rollover data for details. Signal strength claim based only on average LTE signal strength for national carriers.
KCAA, where every day is a great day. KCAA, Loma Linda.
Welcome to Relationships 2.0. I'm Michelle Skeen. I'm excited to chat again with my guest today, Alex Korb. He is the author of The Upward Spiral, Using Neuroscience to Reverse the Course of Depression, One Small Change at a Time. This is part 2 with Alex. He was on the show April 28th discussing the first part of his book, How Our Brains Work. And today he's here to discuss how we can create that upward spiral. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Again. Oh, it's great to have you. So this is really such an important part of the book. Although I have to say, I love part 1, and I got totally hooked on talking about part 1 your first time here. because all of the understanding the brain is so fascinating, and why we do the things we do and feel the way we feel. But now in the second part, you really talk about how people can create an upward spiral and turn and get out of these feelings of depression that they might be experiencing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean, the brain is a complex, dynamic system, which we don't fully understand, but fortunately we do have a good understanding of how to make small changes to a few key circuits, and that can often change the activity in the whole thing.
One of the things that I see with people who struggle with depression, and you talk about this in the book, whether it's friends or clients, is that they have a difficult time just taking that first step. Like, there are so many of these things that we know. Like, I love your story about your own personal story with exercise, and we all know, like, exercise makes you feel so good. And I know that my day is the day that I don't exercise, usually run outside, is a day that doesn't feel quite as good to me, that doesn't start off quite as well. And so, but saying that to someone like, oh, you should exercise, it'll make you feel better, and taking them from, even that knowledge to actually doing it is a big step. I think you handle it well in the book, but what do you say to those people who are like, yeah, I know, but I can't get off the couch?
Yeah. It's an excellent question. And there's probably a few parts to that. The first is, as you say, people often have difficulty taking that first step. So the first part is just making that first step as easy and as small as possible. A lot of times when people say, oh, I should exercise more, well, that means, okay, well, I need to buy, new workout clothes, and,
right.
Because I want to still be in style, because I have to go to my fancy gym, and then I have to drive to get there, and then it becomes too overwhelming. If you conceptualize exercise just as moving slightly more than you do now, then it becomes much easier. Because really, it's helpful to just walk out of your house and walk around the block. And that starts to give you a lot of the benefits of exercise. It can give you some of those boosts in serotonin and norepinephrine. It can start to create a habit, which then, once it's a habit, it becomes easier to do and doesn't require conscious effort. So trying to make that first step as easy and simple as possible will really help. And then the next step also is, a lot of times people with depression create very vague and abstract plans. For example, the notion of, oh, I should exercise more. Well, that is, you can't exercise more. That's not a thing that you can physically do. If you were trying
it's
to
not concrete. There isn't like they haven't created like a stepwise way to go about it.
Exactly. So therefore, how do you know if you're exercising more or not? What are you supposed to actually do? Imagine, if you're trying to give instructions to a computer or a robot, you have to be very specific in what you actually want it to do. I remember there was this exercise we did at one point in middle school that was like, write out the instructions to making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And it was like, well, you have to walk over to the cabinet. You have to open the cabinet. You have to reach in, grab the peanut butter. You have to unscrew the top of the peanut butter. And you have to break it down into simple steps that a robot could follow each instruction. And when you make it concrete, then each specific step becomes much more achievable, and you can it's very easy to start it because it doesn't take a lot of energy, and you can just sort of check it off the list, and now it's in the past, and you create that sense of moving forward. So
yeah, and then that feeling that, oh, I accomplished something, and let me do that again. That kind of, does that kick in like a reward system or something?
Yeah, no, definitely. Breaking things down into smaller steps means that you can accomplish more steps. You can complete tasks. And we know that the brain actually releases dopamine. I know there's a lot of chemicals, even I get confused sometimes, but it releases.
They're all good ones,
dopamine, right? That reward, that little burst of reward when you complete a task. So if you make the task small, then you sort of get a little small burst of dopamine along the way. And that small little burst of dopamine actually helps propel you further on down the path towards your ultimate goal. So if you're having a lot of difficulty, getting up off the couch because you're going to go to the gym and exercise, as I said, well, just go for a walk. And maybe your first step could be stand up off the couch, put on your shoes. And maybe you can't make it through all of those steps on the first day, but just one time standing up off the couch, even if that's all you can do, well, that's at least one step in the right direction.
And I love the way you talk about this in the book and the way that you're talking about it now, because I think so often when people want to make a change and everyone's desperate to feel better, that they make the goal too big. Oh, I'm going to start exercising every day. I just read this article, or I just read this incredible book by Alex Korb called The Upward Spiral, and I'm going to exercise every day. And then day one comes and they don't exercise, and they feel bad about themselves. And then they feel defeated and say, oh, never mind. This isn't going to be like my thing. I'm not an exerciser. And so they kind of set themselves up for failure, which reinforces, all the bad feelings they have for one another.
Yeah. And
I mean, they have for themselves, I meant to say.
And that actually sort of highlights a good point about, the kinds of things that might lead you towards depression. Because a lot of times people think, people who have depression, they're so pessimistic and they have such a negative outlook on things. But a lot of times it's the people who are, very optimistic who are at risk for depression, because you have such high hopes for the future. You have such grand goals. You read this book, and you get inspired, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to do it all. But if you have a little setback or you can't do it, and you have your brain has a really strong response to disappointment or failure, then that can sort of be devastating. And actually, people with depression often, it's not that they started out pessimistic. Oftentimes, they start out very optimistic, but they develop this pessimism as a way to protect themselves from experiencing even deeper losses.
Very interesting, and that makes so much sense. So much sense. One of the things that you also talk about, I mean, you already touched on it a little bit, but the decision-making process, the inability when people are depressed to kind of make decisions, or to find every decision is, I mean, I've seen this with people before. Yeah, I'd have to decide everything seems so monumental, things that someone who isn't depressed might find. I mean, you don't have to be depressed to not be able to make decisions, but I'm just saying that other people might be like, oh yeah, I'll do that, or I won't do that, or I'll do this and not that. Why is it so difficult for people when they're depressed to make decisions? And do people who are indecisive become depressed, or are people who are depressed become indecisive?
Well, yeah, as you say at the end there, which way is it? It can be both. And That's why I call the book The Upward Spiral, because depression is this downward spiral where maybe, if you're indecisive, it could lead you towards depression, and as you get more depressed, it could make you more indecisive. And that's why it's so easy to get stuck. Now, I would say, indecisiveness on its own isn't necessarily going to create, the risk of depression. But, if you're indecisive and, you have a lot of anxiety, then, your indecisiveness feeds your anxiety, which creates more indecisiveness, and that creates more of a problem for you. But if you're just indecisive, but you're a calm person, you don't care about, that indecisiveness, maybe you just be a beach bum or something. You just sit and you'd be happy. You wouldn't do anything with your life, but you'd be fine with it. So it's really these complex interactions between all our different neural circuits that set us at risk for depression. But to talk about, the decisiveness, really one of the problems is that when you are focused on negative outcomes, on the negative consequences of your actions, it becomes much more difficult to make a decision because, if you do one thing, this bad thing can happen, or if you do the other thing, that bad thing could happen. Whereas when you start to focus on, what are the positive things that could come out of each decision, it becomes much easier to make that decision because you're like, I could get, reward A, or I could get reward B. And yes, it's true that, maybe those negative potential downsides are there, but for our happiness, what matters most is not what reality is, but what we focus on, which part of reality we're focusing on.
I would love it if you don't mind telling the story about the mountain climbers, because I think it illustrates your point so beautifully about, why making a decision is better than not making a decision. Or,
Well, no, the idea that actually gets to another part of the story that I didn't say right there, but that decision-making, people often think of decision-making as getting yourself to this emotional state where you feel like, okay, this is the right decision. But when you're depressed, negotiating your own internal emotional state is very difficult and often insurmountable. And really, decision-making is much more, or should be much more about just, taking one small step in a particular direction towards a certain goal. And you don't have to decide, once and for all that, yes, this is the direction that I'm going and that this feels so right. You just have to start moving in one direction. And that story of the mountain climbers comes from this great nonfiction book called Touching the Void, one of those.
Yeah, Touching the Void.
But it's about two mountain climbers who hike this never-before-climbed mountain in the Peruvian Andes. And on the way down, one of them breaks his leg. And there's a snowstorm and night is setting in, and the other guy, doesn't think he can lower him down on his own. So, they're sort of thinking that they're out of luck. And fortunately, spoiler alert, the guy does survive, which is not really a spoiler because he's the author of the book. But he has this beautiful passage where he writes about in mountain climbing, you often encounter these very difficult situations. And what you just have to do is you might not know the best way down or the right way out. There may not even be a best way down. What you have to do is just make a decision and keep making a decision, even if they're the wrong decision, because making a decision moves you forward, even into uncertainty, even if you don't know it's the right thing or not. Because what you know for certain is that if you sit there and do nothing, you're stuffed. as he said.
You're gonna die.
You're gonna die. You know, in mountain climbing, you know, in the wilderness. If you don't do anything, it's not going to work out for you. So you have to make a decision, even if it's the wrong decision. And the way that, you know, works in practice is like, okay, well, you know, you could say, well, I could walk down this way, and in your head you might think, oh, but there might be a cliff, or there might be a bear, or there might be whatever. But there's too many infinite possibilities to know what actually will be there, and you just have to pick one. It's usually good to start with what you think might be the best option, but you just have to pick an option and start going in that direction. And you know what? Yeah. If you get to a cliff and you have to turn around and go back, and you might even end up where you started, it's easy to think, oh man, I made the decision, I went this way and I was wrong, and I had to come back. I haven't accomplished anything. And that's a common attitude that a lot of people take when making decisions. But in reality, even though you're, you know, sort of in the same spot, you're not really in the same spot at all. You've made a decision, and you made another decision to turn around, and that.
And you have more information now too, so you're not in the same spot, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And you probably feel a little bit better about yourself. We need to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to Alex Korb. He is the author of The Upward Spiral. This is a great book, everyone. Even if you don't suffer from depression, we all have down days, and we can use these tools. Stay tuned. We'll be back after a short break. Hi, I'm Michelle Skeen, psychologist, author, and host of Relationships 2.0. On my radio show, I interview guests who present their unique perspectives and expertise on topics that cover all aspects of relationship. If you want to improve your relationship, and let's face it, we all have room for improvement, tune in to Relationships 2.0 with Dr. Michelle Skeen. If you miss my show, or you're interested in listening to Pat's podcast, you can go to my website, www.michelleskeen.com. Again, www.michelleskeen.com. Tune in and improve your relationships.
When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, both of my daughters were pregnant, and everything I was looking forward to turned into everything I was going to miss. First words, first steps. Today, those babies are 3. I'm with them all the time. I don't know what's next, but I know I'm here today.
A Susan G. Komen grant helped pay for Allanthea surgery, and today she's caring for her grandchildren. Help save lives. Visit IamSusanGKomen.org. A public service message from Susan G. Komen.
Hey, what's up? Thinking about you. XOXOXO. Want to snuggle. ... JK. Hit me back. You getting these texts? ? We should hang later. I miss you. Holla at ya, boy. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you at home? Where are you? What are you doing? OMG. You are making me mad. Are you with your ex? You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Relationships 2.0. I'm chatting with Alex Korb. He is the author of The Upward Spiral. Alex, one of the things that you write about in the book is that setting goals increases dopamine. That's really interesting.
Dopamine is this, fabulous neurochemical that gets released when you complete a task, or when you, do something pleasurable, like eat a chocolate bar. So that's one function of dopamine. But interestingly, dopamine also gets released as you move towards completing a goal, because dopamine is both a reward, part of the reward system, and also part of the action system in the brain. And so the way it works is when you have a goal, whether it's an inspiring goal or a less inspiring goal, like go to the kitchen and find a chocolate bar to eat, as you move towards that goal, your brain starts to release dopamine in anticipation of finishing that goal. And that dopamine propels you further along to complete that goal, so that when you complete it, you get an even bigger burst of dopamine.
Am I getting even an extra little burst because I've written it down and then I check it off after I've done it?
Yeah, I think I do think that has that does play a role, because for certain types of activities, it's hard to know when you've completed them or not. So that's going back to what you said earlier about, if your goal is to exercise more. Well, if you say your goal is to exercise more, how do you know if you're actually exercising more? How do you complete that goal?
Yeah.
Because you can always exercise more. So, even if you went to the gym and you came home, you could say, well, I could go for a run now. So how do you know that you've completed that goal?
Right. It's kind of never, like it's a goal you can never achieve, right?
Right, exactly.
It's like this moving target.
Exactly.
So it's just going to be frustrating and make you feel at some point defeated.
Mm-hmm. And that's unfortunately the way a lot of, depressed people conceptualize their goals, or people who are at risk for depression, because, they conceptualize it, in this optimistic way, but that's just not how the brain works. It wants something a little bit more concrete. And so if you break it down into specific steps or specifically achievable goals, then you can make your goal go to the gym on Wednesdays and Thursdays or whatever. And then, you go to the gym Wednesday, you can check it off your list and you say, I did that.
Right.
And it gives you a feeling of accomplishment and, satisfaction that's, largely modulated by dopamine. So, having those specific goals can help. On top of that, there are also, when you have a more long-term goal, like, I want to, get into medical school, or, I want to earn straight A's. Those are very useful because anytime you do an action that sort of moves you towards that long-term goal, then that releases a little bit of dopamine because your brain is anticipating accomplishing that long-term goal. So it helps, if you have those long-term goals, that helps guide your actions, because instead of just, should I go to the party today or not? Should I watch TV or study? If you have a long-term goal that's guiding your actions, then, choosing to study could actually release a little bit of dopamine because your brain knows, I'm doing this to achieve my long-term goal. Whereas if you don't have that long-term goal, and the choice is between, studying or partying, well, the dopamine system will, choose the immediately obvious partying option, because that's, that's going to, get some alcohol, and that'll release some dopamine. And so that part of the brain, the nucleus accumbens, is always going to choose the most immediately pleasurable option. But your prefrontal cortex, which is capable of creating these long-term goals, can actually influence and modulate the effect of dopamine. So if you have that long-term goal, then you can actually make seemingly unpleasurable things a little bit more rewarding and pleasurable, because they release dopamine in anticipation of that long-term goal.
Yeah, because it's in service of that goal. So
exactly.
It feel again this whole idea that, or I feel like this theme is moving forward, right? Is just the doing stuff as opposed to being still and not doing anything. Like,
yeah, because I mean, depression is, you know, a lot of people sort of conceptualize depression as related to learned helplessness, where you just, you know, think that you're just at the whims of the environment. So what's the point in doing anything? Because your actions have no consequences. And so just learning, you know, in a small way, or reteaching yourself that yes, your actions have consequences, even if they're very small. That you could make this positive change, even if it's a small positive change, and get some small positive results. Then you know that'll start pushing you in the right direction. And part of that is, you know, trying to reduce a little bit your focus on the negative. Part of that is trying to reduce, you know, your own self-criticism and, you know, attitude towards failure. Because, you know, if we're very judgmental of ourselves and we have a very strong attitude, you know, about failing, then we're much less likely to attempt things. So that's why, you know, the thoughts and emotions and actions are all interrelated. So you're absolutely right that action is perhaps one of the most important parts, but sometimes you have to, you know, your thoughts or your emotions are getting in the way of your actions, or, you know, the actions that you're choosing to take are creating sort of negative thoughts and emotions, and the way these all interact is, you know, how you either end up in an upward spiral or a downward spiral.
Talk about the importance of sleep.
Oh, yeah. Sleep is of utmost importance. It's ubiquitous in the animal kingdom. You know, all animals sleep.
A lot, right?
Yeah, well, most animals sleep a lot. But it's just the fact that, you know, all animals do it tells us that, like, well, it's got to be really important for something. And what's interesting is, for so long, these scientists haven't had a good understanding of why we sleep. They understood that, you know, if we don't sleep, bad things happen, but they don't understand, like, why we need to sleep, or, like, what exactly sleep is doing for us. But recently we've gotten a much better understanding, and, you know, we understand all of these benefits from sleep. For example, sleep, you know, gives you more energy. It improves concentration. It you know, can modulate the norepinephrine system, making you more robust to stress. And you know, occasionally, you know, getting a bad night's sleep, or even, you know, waking up super early, you know, those can have sometimes, like, you know, you can have a stimulating effect. But in general, we need to have regular sleep in order to function at our
So
best.
like one bad night of sleep, you might still have a great day the next day. But one of the things I've noticed, and I feel like I've read a study about it, is that if I'm running a sleep deficit for a number of days, that I'm just more drawn to unhealthy food, and I tend to be more hungry. That it changes the way that I eat, and not in a good way.
Yeah, no, there's a strong connection between poor sleep and increased body weight. And the mechanism of that is through many different ways. One of them is just like, you know, poor sleep increases your stress hormones, and then your stress hormones, you know, interact with all of your other hormones of, you know, eating, satiety, and hunger, because the stress hormones really, you know, change your glucose levels, And so that, that in itself can have a change. But also sleep, poor sleep in particular has a stronger impact on the prefrontal cortex.
Mm-hmm.
And the prefrontal cortex is responsible, as I said before, for your long-term goals, and impulse control, and, planning for your future.
Yeah.
So when that is compromised, then the dopamine system, the sort of deeper, what we call the striatum, which is part of the reptilian, it's in reptilian in origin in the brain. It's much more ancient than the prefrontal cortex. That sort of starts to take over, and we're drawn to all the foods that are most immediately pleasurable, and those, are usually the high-calorie processed foods, because we know we're going to eat them and we're going to get a lot of dopamine, and that's what's driving our choices, rather than
sugary foods or starchy foods.
Candy bars, exactly. We all have our own downfalls, but
yeah, I think ours is both sugar, based on our last chat.
Yeah, so those those release the dopamine, so that drives our action. But if your prefrontal cortex was working properly, if you gave it enough rest, and you had those long-term goals of, I want to run a 10K next month, or I want to have a healthy heart so I can hang out with my grandkids, and you have those long-term goals, then that actually modulates the dopamine system, meaning that, I'm choosing between a candy bar and kale salad. That prefrontal cortex decision can actually make that kale salad more rewarding and release more dopamine, because you're like, I'm doing this for my grandkids, or I'm doing this so I can, beat my brother in that race next month.
So do you think that one of the first steps is for anyone who's trying to create this upward spiral is set some realistic goals? Maybe some of them are immediate, maybe some of them are long-term, but just to give the person a focus and kind of a reason to then engage in specific behaviors, exercise, making sure they're sleeping enough and eating well.
Having a few, very short-term, very concrete goals is a great way to start an upward spiral. Sometimes when people start thinking about their long-term goals, then they immediately become sort of overwhelmed, because like, oh my God, I could never, achieve that, and then they start to give up. At first, just start, creating some momentum for yourself by, just going for a walk, or try and go to sleep at a reasonable hour, and, make sure you turn the lights on before you go to bed. Things that are eminently doable, and those will start to have an additive, positive effect that will then make it, larger goals seem more achievable. And the other thing that I would suggest is, don't necessarily think so much about your long-term goals, but think about your values and what's important to you.
Yeah.
What inspires you? What kind of person do you want to be?
I think values, and I talk about it all the time in my work, but values is the huge motivator for change.
Yeah, no, definitely, because it's really the driving force behind all our actions, and when you become more aware of that, then then you can start to choose goals that are more in line with your values.
Yeah. And I would imagine that when people are struggling with depression, and we'll have to go on a break after this, but that maybe, it's easy to lose touch with your values when you're really down and you're kind of in your own miserable experience, that's not what's coming to mind for you.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. It is difficult sometimes to keep those in mind.
And so that might be really important to like reconnect with those. And I think a lot of people, even who maybe they don't suffer from depression, but they're just in a bad space, and that in order to get righted, often they need to, it becomes obvious that they've lost focus on their values, or maybe they never went through the exercise of specifically identifying them, which is really, I urge everyone to do that. It's a really healthy and enlightening exercise to go through. You can even Google values, and lots of things will come up if you need, inspiration. But yeah, I think it's really important. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. You've been listening to Alex Korb. Alex is a doctor of neuroscience in the Department of Psychiatry at UCLA, and he's written this fabulous book, The Upward Spiral. We'll talk about it more after this short break. Stay tuned.
America's wounded warriors are coming home. After serving on foreign shores, these brave men and women are returning to their families and communities. Many have wounds you can see, and many have wounds you can't see, like post-traumatic stress disorder. Now that these warriors are back home, they are ready to enter the civilian workforce. To help, Wounded Warrior Project has developed the Warriors to Work program, a career counseling service that helps warriors translate their military experience to the civilian workplace. These extraordinary men and women bring proven world-class job skills and a unique perspective on teamwork to the job. And to ensure the right warrior finds the right job, Wounded Warrior Project works with employers to find just the right match. When you hire a wounded warrior, you hire an intelligent, talented, and committed new employee. Contact Wounded Warrior Project at findwwp.org. Welcome home the brave.
Do you tend to overreact and let your emotions rule your interactions with others? Do you become defensive or find it difficult to see things from another's point of view? Hi, I'm Michelle Skeen. You're not alone. Despite the fact that we all have to deal with people in our daily lives, many of us have difficulties with interpersonal relationships. My suggestion? Pick up a copy of the Interpersonal Problems Workbook. This book combines powerful evidence-based techniques for strengthening relationships in all areas of your life, whether it's at home or work, with a significant other, a parent, or your child. To find out more about the Interpersonal Problems Workbook, go to my website, www.michelleskeen.com. Again, www.michelleskeen.com. Pick up a copy and improve your relationships.
Hey, what's up? Thinking about you. XOXOXO. Want to snuggle, ... JK. Hit me back. You getting these texts? ? We should hang later. I miss you. Holla at ya, boy. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you at home? Where are you? What are you doing? OMG. You are making me mad. Are you with your ex? You better text me back. I'm waiting outside your house.
Relentless, aggressive texting is like sending an angry robot to deliver your message. When does the robot become dangerous? Let us know at that'snotcool.com.
That'snotcool.com.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Relationships 2.0. I'm chatting with Dr. Alex Korb, author of The Upward Spiral. Alex, how do people create good habits, and how is that important? It seems like it's so easy to fall into bad habits, and it's so much more difficult to create and maintain good habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and actually that relates to what we were talking about before the break about change and changing actions. There have been several studies recently that showed one of the best ways to do this is not to focus on trying to change at all, but instead to focus a little bit more on self-compassion and pay attention to your good qualities and what you already appreciate about yourself. Because one of the biggest problems with trying to change, and one of the reasons why bad habits are so difficult to change, is that when we try and focus on the negative parts of ourselves, the things that we want to change, it increases our stress, it makes our decreases our mood and gives us more negative thoughts, which actually, ironically, activates the habit system. The more negative your outlook and the more stressed you are, the more likely you are to just activate your habits.
Yeah.
So one of the best suggestions I have comes from, there are a couple studies on changing eating habits, trying to eat more fruits and vegetables, and another on quitting smoking. And these involved having participants pay attention to their positive qualities. They were asked to leading questions like have you ever done something to help out someone in need, or other things that highlighted their positive qualities.
Right.
And these actually led to them, eating more fruits and vegetables in the next week, or in the eating study, and smoking fewer cigarettes, or creating a stronger intention.
So of creating this self-compassion and self-love that then makes you want to take better care of yourself because you're valuing yourself.
Yeah. No, that's definitely true. When you're valuing yourself, then then obviously it does make more sense to eat healthy, or engage in fewer bad habits. So when people start with saying, "Oh, I hate this about myself. I want to change this. I want to change," starting from that position makes it very difficult to change. Instead, start by focusing on what you like about yourself. Start by focusing on what a good person you are, what good things you do. Even if, just because you do bad things, or, you have some failings or failures, those don't negate your positive qualities. Even if in your mind you think the negative qualities outweigh the positive qualities, still try and focus, reflect upon, write down those positive qualities. If you're having difficulty, talk to an old friend who, thinks very highly of you, and help you, pay attention to those positive qualities. Because in the end, it will make it easier to change some of your negative qualities, or, you might find that, well, once you've paid attention to all your positive qualities, then your negative qualities might not bother you as much.
Right. Again, like more focus on the positive and less of a focus on the negative. And even for those of us who don't suffer from depression, I feel it may at some point become kind of automatic, but I feel like you can make that choice. Like that can also be a very conscious choice that you have to remind yourself of. I know a lot of people, have had this tradition, like with their kids, that, when the kids are little, like at the dinner table, they'd say, everyone share like their best part about what happened today, and we used to do that. And I think it forces you to think about, like, what was it that made your day really wonderful, and to maybe bring some awareness to, I notice more how really small interactions in my life can have a really profound effect a positive effect on my day or my week. And, it could just be something that the barista at Pete's says. But remembering that, like, bringing awareness to that so that you can internalize that and bring some more positive thoughts and experiences to your awareness and into your life. Is that kind of what you're talking about too?
Yeah. And, unfortunately, it doesn't work the same for everyone. To the same degree for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of times people can be very judgmental of people with depression, or even judgmental of themselves, and there can be a stigma because we think, well, why don't you just focus on the positive? Like, stop. Like, it's you're just making the wrong choices. You need to focus on the positive. And while it's true that focusing on the positive will tend to make you feel better, and then focusing on the negative, based on your own particular neurochemistry and the tuning of your circuits, it might not be enough on its own to bring you out of depression, right? Because depression is much more complex than that. But it's certainly true that if you take a minute at the end of each day and write down a couple things that you were grateful for during the day, or if you take a minute before you go to sleep to just think about a happy memory, those things will tend to make you feel better. It might not be enough to overcome depression, but it's better to try that, and that will start to push you in an upward direction.
Well, one of the things that I'd love to ask you about, as someone who studied so much about depression and certainly, dealt with a lot of depressed people, someone else who deals with some other, disorder said that in couples, like in a relationship, that one of the difficulties is the person who has whatever, like severe anxiety, PTSD, depression, tends to be the one who has more control in the relationship. And particularly with someone who's depressed, that, their partner wouldn't want to do anything to make them more depressed. But at the same time, maybe deals with their own frustration because they do feel like, oh my gosh, can't you just get up and do this? Mm-hmm. And, their partner says, well, I can't because I'm depressed.
Right.
And, how do you, what do you recommend for the partner who feels kind of, who wants to be helpful, who loves their significant other, but also feels kind of helpless and trapped by their partner's depression?
Well, that's a very good question. And, the first part is to sort of recognize that, you might be feeling trapped and out of control about your partner's depression, and take that little bit of knowledge to recognize, well, that's how your partner feels all the time about everything.
Mm-hmm.
So no one likes to feel that way.
Right.
But understanding and accepting that you can't change everything that you don't like,
right.
That helps you focus less on the things that you can't change or that you can't do anything about, and
mm-hmm.
focus on the things that you do appreciate, and maybe the things that you can do something about. So having that, compassion for the other person, is a first step. Instead of thinking about how is this affecting you, just recognize it's not about you at all. They're going through this,
right.
Emotional journey, and the more the partner wraps themselves up in it, I can't change them, I can't make them feel happy, then it's just going to make that that partner feel worse, and it's going to make the depressed partner feel worse because they're going to see I'm having this negative effect on the person that I care about. So really, if you're the healthy partner, you can be there to support partner. You can be there to encourage them, but you can't change them, and you can't force them to change.
Right.
And if you on top of that, I think, you can't rely always on your partner to provide you with everything that you need. I mean, we have a lot of sort of neurochemical needs. You can sort of think of them as daily recommended allowance of, vitamins and minerals and neurotransmitters.
Right.
And your spouse, particularly if they're depressed, can't always provide you with what you need. So, just make sure that, you're talking with your other friends and getting support from other friends and family, and that you can still go for a walk. You can always try and encourage your partner to join you, but you can't
you can't impose your will on them, and they need to. So would you say that it's, maybe as a spouse, you would point out maybe positive things that they did in the day that contributed to your day, to kind of model that, pointing out the positive, but not get attached to the outcome. And
no, that's a big thing. Though, if I was depressed and, my spouse is always like trying to change my depression and trying to disagree every time I say, oh, well, I had a really, hard time at work. And then you're like, oh, yeah, but you found $10. Don't you remember that? Whatever. You like.
Oh, right. That would be super annoying. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Okay, take all that back that I just said. That would be awful.
Well, no, that's why it's a complex. It's a complex relationship. Like, you do want, the important thing is the connection between the two people, and that's one of the difficulties. That depression sort of makes it difficult to connect a lot of times. But as the partner, your most important job should be to try and connect with the other person. And that once you've created that connection, that in itself will help support them. Whereas if you're just like stop focusing on that, stop thinking about all the worrying about all that, like that's just gonna disrupt.
Don't be so negative.
Exactly. So that's why a lot of times people who are like so wrapped up in positive psychology, they're sitting around telling everyone, oh, stop focusing on the negative, just focus on the positive, and they're really annoying.
It's annoying. It's not real life either.
Right, because you're not connecting with the person. You got to connect.
Right.
First.
Well, there's no empathy there, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the difficulties in having a partner who's depressed is empathy. Because when you are very empathic, you feel the suffering of other people very deeply, and that's very difficult to deal with. And sometimes we can't deal with it, so we start to shut down a little bit, and we try and disconnect from the other person. And a lot of times, the best solution is to just try and get better at dealing with your own,
what's going on with yourself.
Exactly.
Like, stay in your own lane. Alex, you have been absolutely fabulous for the second time. The book is The Upward Spiral. This hour flew. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but this really is such a great resource for everyone. Learn more about your brain and what you can do to create an upward spiral. Alex, congratulations again on a great book.
Thanks so much. I know it's so wonderful talking to you again.
Thanks for joining me. Take care. Thanks, Joe.
On board KCAA's Inland Talk Express. KCAA, Loma Linda, 1050 a.m. The station that leaves no listener behind.
Here's the latest amid hydrant. South Carolina lawmakers will debate whether to remove the Confederate flag from state capitol grounds as the families of the 9 Charleston church shooting victims are earning praise from South Carolina lawmakers.
This offered by the 9 innocent victims' family is proof that evil in this state will never prevail. divide us.
That's South Carolina Speaker of the House Jay Lucas. The House voted overwhelmingly today to begin debate on whether to remove the flag, and the Senate did so through a voice vote. Northeast bracing for possible damage tonight as a strong storm system is moving in from the Midwest. Tornado watch in effect until 11 o'clock Eastern time tonight for parts of Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine,